Okay, the things that you're going to need for this particular project is your mat, a little bit of water on your sponge, one sculpting tool, one needle tool, and your drawing, and your clay. Okay, so the clay, you're gonna notice there's two packages in your bucket of clay, and they have different names on them. So we've been using Crayola Air Dry Clay. So you can put that one back in. And now I'd like for us to try a different type of clay. It's called Mex-O Air Dry Clay. It's actually a stoneware that's produced by Laguna Clay Company. It has a lot of the same properties as Crayola Air Dry Clay, but it does have one other ingredient in it, and it's called grog, G-R-O-G. Grog is a fine-grained sand, or let's just say that's a fine-grained sand that is combined with the clay that gives it a little bit more strength, and it's better for larger sculptures, so we're going to be using that. So go ahead and take out your Mex-O clay and put the rest of it aside. And you're going to need, I would say, go ahead and get, let's look at it like this. You take this and you divide this into 4, and pinch that, just pinch off a quarter. Pinch that off. That's quite a big chunk of clay. You guys haven't used that much clay before. So it should, I can actually take a little bit of that off. So I would say this is probably equal to a good handful size piece of clay. So it fits in my hand comfortably. It's probably equal to the size of your pumpkin. However, we're going to be using, this is only going to be half of it. And then your other half, so we're actually going to be combining 2 pieces together. Okay, so for now we're going to just start with 1 pinch pot. So go ahead and put all the clay back in the bag, get the air out of it, close it up, put it aside for now. So I'm looking at my tomato climate change adjuster named Weather. I see that the basic body form for me is going to be a tomato, and so with a large tomato. So I'm going to just be using this to make the bottom portion of the pinch pot. So I have my clay. I'm going to roll it around, get it nice and compact, super compact. Kind of work out some of the wrinkles. You don't have to get them all out. Okay, and then the technique is you hold it in your less dominant hand. For me, that's my left hand. And then I'm going to take my thumb of my right hand and I'm going to kind of drill it, gently drill it down towards the bottom. Okay, and so it should sort of look like this. And then, continuing to hold it in your less dominant hand, you're going to take your right hand or your other hand and gently hold it around. Notice that I am keeping it in my hand and I'm not putting it on the table, because if you put it on the table, it's going to flatten out and we don't want that. So I'm going to just gently go around carefully, and I'm feeling the walls, and I'm trying to make the walls as even as possible. So this should be, you should remember this from the first couple weeks of school. Now we're actually going to be using your pinch pots to create a sculpture. Okay, and as you do this, you're going to be trying to make this part rather symmetrical. And again, since mine is a tomato shape, I'm going to try to make mine as round as possible. But you guys are going to be shifting your shape according to how you're designing your superhero. So now that you have one pinch pot made, now let's try to match it. And this is a close-up view of the basic techniques that I just previously went over. So you start with your thumb and always compact the lip. It's one of the most important things to do because you're going to be resting another pinch pot on top of it. So the lip needs to be super solid and compact. If you see a wrinkle or a crack, just smooth it over. At this point, you probably don't need any water because this is clay right out of the bag, but feel free to use a drop or two if you need to. So I'm checking to make sure all the walls are even in thickness, and once they line up like this, and you compact the lip one more time, you're just about ready to attach them together. But sometimes it takes a little bit of adjusting. Now, as you're working on these, you might not be able to finish both of your bowls at the same time. So while you're working on one bowl, you want to make sure that you keep your bowls nicely wrapped up. So take a piece of saran wrap, or in this case, this is simply a bag from Sprouts bag, which is a great thing to use. And you're going to put your pinch pot right down on it. You take your plastic and wrap it up nice and tight like this so that there's no air. Make sure there's no air. And then you're going to put that aside, and then you want to wrap your second one, because if you let them dry, you have to start all over. Okay? So keep those in a safe place, nice and wrapped and nice and tight, and you should have no problem if you wrap them like this. Okay, in this next part of the video, I'm going to show you how to join them. So when you unwrap them, you're probably going to notice they firmed up a little bit, and that's a good thing. If you try to combine them prematurely before they are firm, they're going to collapse on you. So it's a good idea to let them firm up a little bit. You're going to score and slip them. So I'm using my needle tool to score. And then you're going to use a generous amount of water. Notice I'm tapping it on and I'm not brushing it on. If you brush it on, you're going to get rid of all your score marks. Okay, now we're going to pick them up and we're going to connect them. So I'm putting light pressure all the way around, and I'm trying not to smash it, because a common mistake is people will start smashing it. You don't want to see any air. Okay. Okay, so that is nicely connected. Around a couple times. Okay, so now the next step, keep it in my hand. So this next step, you're going to weld the seam. And you're going to use your sculpting tool to gently pull the clay into the seam. And this is going to assure that it won't crack when it starts to dry. So you're actually moving the clay and blending the seam. And it's okay to make some marks, because you're going to end up covering those up with a reinforcement coil and then smoothing the whole thing over. So it's mostly important at this point to actually move that clay into the line, into the seam, and really make sure that you have a strong connection. Take your time, go slowly, Make sure that there's no air, no cracks, and really, really, really make a strong connection. So now you're going to take a small piece of clay and roll a reinforcement coil. You've had practice with that. This reinforcement coil is going to be relative to the size of the piece. So this is quite a bit thicker than the one that you use to reinforce your pumpkin stem. I'd say make it about as thick as a pencil. It's a good thing, a good way to measure it. Can be a little bit thicker than that, but I wouldn't go too thick. You're going to score your shape right over the seam that you just welded. So a crosshatch is usually a good way to score it. Put a generous amount of water on. And notice again that I'm just tapping the water on. I'm not really brushing it on. You can also put water on your coil if you need to, if it feels like it's a little dry. And then just weave it around a little bit at a time. And now you're going to hold it in both of your hands like I'm doing here, and you're moving part of it over to the right and part of your coil over to the left. So essentially you're making sure it's going completely over the seam. Now you can take your broad sculpting tool and really start blending that coil into your form. So you want the objective is to get rid of the coil in a visual way. So in other words, you don't want to see the coil anymore. You just want to take that extra clay and blend it into your form. And just, if you work a little bit at a time, and you'll gradually go around the piece. And if you have extra clay that's getting in the way on your tool, just wipe it off on your sponge, as I'm showing you here. Once you go around it, it should look pretty good. And you could just take a very damp sponge, give it a little moisture, and use the back of your school ID. This won't hurt it at all. Just use your school ID. You can form a little C shape with it. See, as I'm showing you, there's a little C shape. I'm going to pinch it between your thumb and your finger. And then that will really smoothen out your whole piece. This is actually called a rib, R-I-B. And go over the top. Not only is it smoothing your piece, but it's also helping to shape it. Iron out any of the bumps. Once you're satisfied with your piece and you can't see any evidence of the coil, you have all the bumps smoothed out, go ahead and take a top view and a side view picture and upload those to the Schoology album. Then you can go ahead and wrap your piece really tightly, making sure there's no trapped air between the saran wrap and the clay, and place it in a baggie also. And be sure to keep it in a safe place so be ready to work on next time.